The weight of a hammer. The acceptance letter from MIT sat on the kitchen table for 3 days before I finally showed it to my father. I'd rehearsed the moment 100 times, how I'd slide the envelope across the breakfast table, how he'd read it with those careful, deliberate eyes, how maybe, just this once, he'd smile and say the words I'd been chasing since I was old enough to hold a wrench. "Good job, son." But Dad had never said those words. Not when I'd graduated top of my class. Not when I'd won the state science fair. Not when I'd rebuilt the engine of his '67 Mustang at 15, my hands black with grease, my heart swollen with hope. Instead, he said other things. Strange things. Things that left me hollowed out and hungry. The morning I finally showed him the letter, Dad was at the workbench in the garage, rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Chen's Corolla. His hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, each movement economical, purposeful. He'd been a machinist for 37 years before the factory closed. Now he fixed cars in our garage for cash and kept his silence like a religion. I set the envelope beside his coffee mug. He glanced at it, wiped his hands on a red rag, and read. His face remained as still as concrete. The seconds stretched like taffy. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. A lawn mower sputtered to life. Finally, he looked up at me. "You earned this," he said. That was all. I felt the familiar sting behind my eyes, the tightness in my throat. You earned this. Not congratulations. Not pride. Just a statement of fact, delivered in that flat, empty tone he used for everything. "Thanks," I managed, and left before he could see my hands shaking. I spent the summer working at the garage with him, saving money for school. We worked in our usual silence, him diagnosing problems with some sixth sense I'd never inherited, me following instructions, trying not to disappoint. One August evening, Mrs. Rodriguez brought in her minivan. Transmission trouble. Dad slid underneath while I held the work light. "Your boy's leaving for college soon," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You must be so proud." Dad's voice echoed from beneath the vehicle. He earned it. Mrs. Rodriguez laughed. "Well, of course he did. But still. Mitt. That's incredible." There was a long pause. The clink of metal on metal. "Proud's the wrong word," Dad said finally. "Proud is what you feel when you did something. This is all him." I nearly dropped the light. The night before I left for Boston, I found Dad in the garage at midnight, building something at the workbench. He didn't look up when I came in, just kept working, measuring, cutting, sanding. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Almost done." I watched him work in the yellow overhead light, this man who'd raised me alone after Mom died, who'd worked double shifts to keep me in AP classes, who'd never once told me he was proud. He held up the finished piece, a wooden box, perfectly jointed, the corners fitted so precisely you could barely see the seams. On the lid, he'd routed my initials. "For your tools," he said. "You'll need good tools. Good tools last." My throat closed up completely. "Dad." "I never said good job to you," he interrupted, his eyes still on the box, his calloused fingers tracing the wood grain. "My father said it to me all the time. Good job, son. Good job. Said it when I passed tests I didn't study for. Said it when I won trophies for showing up. Said it so much it didn't mean anything." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were wet. "When I say you earned this, I mean every word. I mean you worked when it was hard. I mean you didn't quit when you wanted to. I mean you built something real with your own hands, your own mind, your own sweat." He pressed the box into my hands. "I mean I see you. Not what I did. Not luck. You." The box was still warm from the friction of his sanding. "Good job is cheap," he said quietly. "It's a pat on the head. But you earned this. That's recognition. That's respect. That's me saying I know what it cost you, and it was worth every bit of it." I set the box down carefully and hugged him. He stiffened. We weren't huggers, but then his arms came up around me, strong and certain as the buildings he'd helped build with the parts he'd machined. "Thank you," I whispered. "For seeing me." "Always have," he said. "Always will." I'm 34 now. I have my own daughter. When she comes home with good grades, with art projects, with small victories and large ones, I sometimes catch myself about to say good job, that reflexive, easy phrase. But then I think of my father, of his calloused hands and careful words. I kneel down. I look her in the eyes. And I say, you earned this. I watch her stand a little taller. I watch her understand, perhaps without words, that I see her effort, her struggle, her growth. That I'm not congratulating myself for making her, but honoring her for becoming herself. The wooden box sits on my desk at the robotics company I founded. Inside it, I keep my father's old machinist tools, the ones he gave me before he died. On difficult days, I open it and run my fingers over the worn handles, remembering, you earned this. The weight of those words. The gift of being truly seen. It turns out my father was right. Some phrases aren't just more powerful than good job. They're the difference between praise and witnessing. Between applause and recognition. Between saying someone did well and acknowledging who they've become in the doing. My daughter asks me sometimes why I never just say good job. Because, I tell her, holding her small hand in mine, you're worth more than that. You're worth the truth. And in her eyes, I see what I must have looked like all those years ago in the garage, hungry not for easy praise, but for the deeper gift of being known. You earned this. The words my father used to say, I love you. The words I now use to say the same.